Good morning. Veterans Day is a celebration to honor America's veterans for their love of country, thank them for their willingness to serve, and salute them for the sacrifices made to protect the freedoms we enjoy. As we begin our celebration, let's pause for a moment of silence to honor our veterans past, present, and future. Thank you. I'm Steve Macklin, and on behalf of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Veterans Committee, we welcome you to our annual Veterans Day celebration. I want to thank all our veterans, special guests, directorate representatives, and all who are here to support and honor our veterans.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
For some of us, it's been a few years since we last wore our uniform. For others still serving, it might have been just last weekend. I would like to share a few facts about Veterans Day and those we honor. Many of you know the historical facts of Veterans Day. However, it is important to refresh our memories to make sure the history is not forgotten. World War I, known as the Great War, officially ended on June 28, 1919, with the Treaty of Versailles in France. However, the fighting actually ceased 7 months earlier when an armistice ceased hostilities on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. For that reason, November 11th, 1918 is regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. President Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day. An act approved May 13, 1938, made the 11th of November of each year a legal holiday and a day to be dedicated to the cause of world peace and to be thereafter celebrated and known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day was primarily a day set aside to honor veterans of World War I. In 1954, after World War II had required the greatest mobilization of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen in the nation's history, and after American forces fought aggression in Korea, the 83rd Congress amended the Act of 1938 by striking the word armistice and inserting in its place the word veterans. With the approval of legislation on June 1, 1954, November 11th became a day to honor all American veterans. Today's U.S. population is 328.2 million, The number currently serving in the U.S. Armed Forces is 1.4 million, or 0.4% of our current population. There are approximately 22 million military veterans in the U.S. population, or 7.3% of all living Americans have served in the military at some point in their lives. You are a small, special group. Now let's take a moment to reflect upon service times as we watch our employee slideshow, showcasing our employee veterans, active service members, and family members. At this time, I would like to introduce our laboratory director, Dr. Thomas Zachariah.
At Oak Ridge National Laboratory, we are especially proud of the contributions of our military veterans and reservists who bring unique skills and expertise to our national missions. This Veterans Day, we recognize our 550 staff members who are veterans and 40 who are members of the Guard and Reserves, including 8 who are currently deployed. ORNL was recently recognized with a Pro Patria Award given by the Defense Department for employer support of the Guard and Reserve. It was a great honor, and support from members of the military will always be a lab priority. To those who have served this great nation in the Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, or Coast Guard, thank you. And to those who remain on call today, know that you have our appreciation and full support.
So, Dr. Zachariah, on behalf of ESGR, I want to say thank you so much for the support that you've given to our Guard and Reserve folks that work for you.
A veteran support group offers a virtual salute to Oak Ridge National Lab.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the 5,400 staff who work at the laboratory,
Helicopter pilots, combat medics, air tanker crews, almost 40% of America's military force is made up of men and women in the Guard and Reserve, warriors with day jobs.
When the Gatlinburg fires happened, I had 24 hours notice and the lab didn't blink an eye.
A cyber protection expert at the National Lab, this major in the Tennessee Army National Guard moved into a similar role responding to the Gatlinburg wildfires in 2016. This 23-year military veteran helped direct secure communication between firefighters and military units responding to that emergency.
Pretty much most everyone in my family has served in some capacity. So it's one of those things that we kind of just were raised that you give back. Either you give back to your community in a civilian manner, you give back, in the military.
They truly get an immersive training experience, which brings a whole unique perspective back to the laboratory and helping us kind of protect the mission here.
Leaders at the lab see the benefits of recruiting and employing veterans. And that's the goal of a group called ESGR, Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve.
We perform boss lifts where we transport a small group of employers to observe and participate in military training exercises. And this allows them to better understand what their employees do during their military service.
Almost 11% of the workforce at ORNL, or roughly 600 employees at the National Lab, are veterans. And when Guard and reservists have to break away for military training or emergency response, the lab ensures their paychecks don't change.
So if the military pay is less than their ORNL salary, we top them up, so which is not something that all employers do.
ESGR started almost 50 years ago by the Department of Defense as a way to help bridge the worlds of what it calls citizen warriors. And that history isn't lost on the leader of a lab created to change the world.
Whether it was 75 years ago, the winning the war, or today winning the war against pandemic. So again, thank you. We are really privileged to have these veterans and reservists as part of our team and serving the country in our own way.
I'd now like to introduce our guest speaker, Pastor Chris Edmonds. Pastor Chris Edmonds, who is the author of the award-winning book, No Surrender, and an inspirational speaker who is the senior pastor of Piney Grove Baptist Church in Maryville. He is a business graduate from the University of Tennessee, a senior professional in human resources, and holds a master's degree from Liberty Theological Seminary. He also teaches leadership to military leaders at the University of Alabama at Huntsville. While serving as Director of Human Resources for Prism Corporation, Chris supported ORNL as a consultant. His father, Roddy, worked for ORNL in the late 1940s before being called up for the Korean War, and his mother, Mary Ann, retired from K-25 in 1994 as a security officer after 17 years of service. Chris and his wife, Regina, live in Maryville near their 3 daughters and sons-in-law and 10 of the coolest grandkids on the planet.
Thank you, Steve, and Oak Ridge National Lab, Veterans Committee. It's a joy to be back at the lab. You know, my story begins with 2 old diaries, just weathered, fragile books. The diaries belong to a young man from Tennessee fighting for his country on a continent near the edge of collapse. Its owner, my father, passed away years earlier. Since then, the diary remained tucked away with other mementos from his time during World War II. He served with distinction. Master Sergeant Roddy Edmonds of the 106th Infantry was captured during the Battle of the Bulge and spent 100 harsh days in 2 German prisoner of war camps. This was the story our family knew. To us, it was the totality of his service he never talked about. While reading Dad's diary one evening, his words moved my heart. Dad wrote a lot of things I'm not going to write because they're not exactly nice to talk about. I know God was with us, and he answered our prayers. I learned men even better than before. Some were good, some were bad, some were better, and some were worse. His words ignited my heart and inspired me to look further into his service. Dad was the highest-ranking American soldier in Stalag 9A, a POW camp for non-commissioned officers near Ziegenhain, Germany. It was late January 1945, and even in the POW camps, the Nazis had strict anti-Jew policies, and they would segregate the Jewish POWs from the non-Jews and send them to certain death in murderous concentration camps. As a matter of fact, American Jewish soldiers were told that if they ever fell into enemy hands, they would destroy their dog tags and never mention their Jewish identity. Late on the evening of January 26, the Germans sent orders to my father that only the Jewish Americans were to report for the next morning's roll call. Just the Jews, no one else. All who disobeyed would be shot. Without hesitation, my father turned to his men and he said, "We're not doing that. Tomorrow morning, we all fall out." It was bitterly cold that morning, January 27, 1945. As the Nazi commander approached, he couldn't believe his eyes. All the Americans, nearly 1,300 soldiers, stood in sharp formation. The Nazi commander, a Major Ziegmann, is stunned. He's in charge of all the POW camps. He issued the orders, and he's there to remove the Jews. Standing to Dad's left was Sergeant Lester Tannenbaum, a 19-year-old Jewish kid from the Bronx, Dad's friend and one of Dad's best soldiers. On Dad's right was a new friend, Sergeant Paul Stern, a combat medic from the 28th Division, another Jewish kid from the boroughs of New York. Enraged, the major stormed over to my father and he screamed, "They can't all be Jews!" To which my father declared, "We are all Jews here." Well, the Nazi turned blood red. Lunging forward, he pressed his pistol hard into my father's forehead. "One last chance, Sergeant. You will order the Jews to step forward or I will shoot you right now." By this point, Dad and his men had faced a brutal battle, a death march, bombing while locked in a boxcar, 40 days of intentional starvation. Our brave boys were filthy, lice-infested, haunted by dysentery, suffering, frostbite, and trench foot. They were forever hungry, forever cold. My father had been shot, he'd been beaten, he'd been interrogated, kicked, smashed with rifle butts, bitten by dogs, and the only word he would share with me about his experience, "Son, we were humiliated." And just 2 days earlier from this moment, he and his men were forced to watch the savage execution of a young Russian soldier and told the same would happen to them if they disobeyed Nazi orders. Maybe that's why Dad wrote in his diary, "No one can realize the horrors an infantry soldier goes through." You get scared, and I mean scared. Yet there Dad stood, along with his men. They stood strong, fearless, resolute. Finally, with the gun still pressed to his forehead, Dad spoke. He spoke calmly. He spoke confidently. He said, "Major, you can shoot me, but if you do, you'll have to kill all of us because we know who you are. And you will stand for war crimes when we win this war, and you will pay." Well, the Nazi turned white. His arm trembled as he still pressed the gun into my father's forehead. Lester recalled, "Time froze like the ground beneath their feet." No one knew what was going to happen next. Recently, I stood where Dad looked evil in the eye and dared a Nazi to shoot. Thanks to the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous, I traveled with them and a film crew to Belgium and Germany to follow the footsteps of my father. Through the magic of cinema, let's go there now and let's hear more of the story, not from me, but from the men who were there. My father passed away in August of 1985. I was 26 years old. You know, my father, he never really talked about his experiences in World War II or his time as a prisoner of war. He would say, "Son, there's some things I'd rather not talk about." While my father was a prisoner of war, he kept a diary. Late one night after reading his diary, I Googled his name and rank, and the first link that came up was an article in the New York Times.
I was being interviewed by the New York Times in 2008. All of a sudden, I remembered that there was a Master Sergeant, Roddy Edmonds, who saved my life when he defied the Germans in POW camp. That's all I said. In the middle of that article, Lester mentions the bravery and courage of his Master Sergeant, Roddy Edmonds. And I said, I got to find out what really happened to my dad during his POW experience. I was born in the Bronx on August 8, 1923.
January 27, 1924.
I was born in Cleveland on April 24, 1924.
June 17, 1925, in Brooklyn, New York. I got the draft notice shortly after I turned 18, and I reported in for the draft exam, and they found me totally acceptable. I was breathing.
I was 18 years old. I was assigned as a combat medic to care for the wounded soldiers on the battlefield.
I was in headquarters company of the 422nd Infantry Regiment of the 106th Division. and that's where I met Les Tanner.
And I was Sergeant Lester Tannenbaum of the headquarters company, and Roddy Edmonds was the master sergeant. Roddy grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. He probably never met a Jew in Tennessee when he went into the Army.
My dog tag had the information on it, my name and my serial number, and the letter H for Hebrew, so that if they found our bodies, they would know how to bury us.
One of the things we were told that if we were captured, we should destroy our dog tags.
Because being a Jew in that circumstance, we didn't know what our future was.
And off we went to the front. We went over as replacements for filling up the slots that had been opened by casualties. It was December, it was snowy, it was the coldest winter in 50 years.
We replaced the 2nd Division on the front, right in the Siegfried line, on the German side of the border.
We were very vulnerable.
The men had come and were told that this was a quiet sector. And when they got here, just 6 days after they got here, the war came to them.
The first day of the attack was December 16th.
I awakened and heard shell fire.
St. Vith was being attacked. That's our division headquarters 10 miles in back of us.
We were there when the Germans broke through with the Battle of the Bulge, and they broke through in force.
They broke through north of us and south of us.
We were completely surrounded, and we knew we were cut off.
Our position was untenable, and we finally decided to make a break for it. And we are cut off and surrounded by columns of German tanks, guns, troops.
Captain Forster said, "It's hopeless."
I'm reading from my father's diary that he kept. It was a hopeless cause in our case. When Captain Foster surrendered us, he did a very wise thing. Our rifles were no good against tanks and 88 fire.
And out we came to become part of what was the largest collection of captured GIs in World War II, from the 106th, from the 28th, and others. We began to start our march to we didn't know where.
There was a concern that the Germans would just shoot us up. When you're in brutal hands, like the Germans were, you're scared as hell.
I particularly was concerned because my name was obviously Jewish.
And then we got to the railhead, Gerolstein.
They loaded us on boxcars.
We were packed like sardines in that boxcar. No food or water on the 4-day trip to Bad Orb.
So the boxcars we were in turned out to be exactly the same cars that were taking the Jews to concentration camps.
And we went further into Germany.
Boarded train, Thursday, 21 December 44. Arrived Stalag 9B, Bad Orb. Monday, 25 December 44. Registered Tuesday, 26 December 44.
We had to register. Name, rank, serial number.
But then they started asking questions about your religion.
The Germans segregated the Jewish POWs.
And we were assigned to the Jewish barracks.
A special barracks surrounded by barbed wire within the prison. We were in a prison within the prison. The order came down one day that the non-commissioned officers were getting on trucks and were being taken to another camp.
They took all the sergeants and corporals, all the non-commissioned officers, whether they were Jewish or not.
And luckily I am taken out of that isolated place at Bad Orb, and the next thing I know, I'm on a train going to Ziegenhain.
The Jewish POWs who had been left behind were shipped to a slave labor camp.
All of them later were sent to Berger, and many of them died there.
Arrived Stalag 9A, Friday, 26 January 45. I'm walking along Main Street of Stalag 9A, Ziegenhain. People are living here, even today. It's really hard to imagine that these barracks still stand almost intact the way that they were when Dad and his men were here.
British were there, French were there, Russians were there, and now we were coming in to occupy a quadrant of that whole thing.
There were about 1,200 American prisoners. Of the 1,200, I would estimate maybe 200 were Jewish.
In Zingenheim, in my barracks, Lester was in it, Paul was in it, Roddy was in it.
So there's about 240 men in the barracks. You were given one thin blanket. That was all you had.
You went to bed hungry, you got up hungry, you were hungry forever.
Dinner was a piece of bread. We had 10 men sharing one loaf of ersatz bread. So it was probably half flour and half sawdust.
I lost 60 pounds in 3 months. It was January 27, 1945, when the Germans announced that all Jewish American prisoners would fall out the following morning. Just them. Anyone who didn't fall out would be shot. Same thing that they had said at Bad Orb. Roddy, for the first time in his experience, was in complete command. There was no one there to give him orders. It was his decision. He said, we're not going to do that. Everyone is going to fall out just as we do every morning. That following morning, Roddy is standing at the head of formation, and I was standing by his side.
I was there, the German was there, and Lester was there. So I heard every word that the commandant said.
Major Siegmann comes up to Roddy, and he says, you can't all be Jews. And Roddy said, we are all Jews.
That famous line, we're all Jews here, that will live in Jewish history.
Takes out his Luger and puts it next to Roddy's forehead, and he says, you will order the Jews to step forward, or I will shoot you right now. And Roddy said to him, Major, you can shoot me, you can shoot all of us, but we know who you are. And this war is almost over, and you'll be a war criminal. And with that, the Major lowered his Luger, about-faced, went back to his headquarters.
We were able to track the war pretty closely, even as we were POWs. So we knew we were within days of being liberated, hopefully.
The German commanders informed Roddy that they were going to evacuate the camp.
They don't want to be around when the Americans come.
And under Roddy's leadership, we refused. And that's why I'm here to tell you about the story today.
Roddy said, we're just too weak to go on a long march.
We were in such lousy shape. The chances of coming out of that alive are not good.
Nobody marches out of camp. You break ranks and you run back into the barracks. And you keep doing that all day.
The day dawns, and in come the Germans. House, house!
Rouse, getting up, going back and forth.
We can see the British are moving out. Everybody else is moving out. We're still standing there. Finally, they give up, the Germans.
The German officers came up to Roddy and said, okay, camp is yours. And they marched out. We were left alone in the camp.
It gets very quiet. So now I climb up, a few of us climb up on the roof of our barracks, and then we see 2 lines of tanks.
We were liberated on March 30th by an American armored group.
The 6th Armored Division, as it turns out.
They were amazed to see these American soldiers, thin, hungry. It was such a happy day.
We were liberated on March 30th, which was the 2nd day of Passover.
And every time I ran a Seder, I would make this point because it was the date of my freedom.
I've made new friends and lost some. I don't know whether all my boys are alive or not, but I pray that they are. It all seems sort of a bad dream.
Well, they took us to Camp Lucky Strike, and I lost track of Roddy, and I never saw him again. after that day. But it was never out of my mind. I have to tell you, that experience and Roddy was a defining experience in my life.
Roddy was incredible. He never really got his recognition, except among us.
We were very lucky to have him with us.
That such people can exist gives you hope, maybe, for humanity.
We stood there, we were the witnesses. We were the witnesses.
I've been following the footsteps of my father, and it's led me here. The lives of 200 Jewish men were forever changed right here.
It wasn't only my life. Our lives multiplied. I have 4 children. I have 6 grandchildren. I have 2 great-grandchildren. So would I have 18 people that wouldn't be here without him? Multiply that by 200, and you can see how important that decision has been.
That's the biggest joy for me, is to see the real people, the lives that have been touched and changed.
Roddy could no more have turned over any of his men to the Nazis than he could stop breathing. He just couldn't do it. A righteous man.
My father saved the lives of more than 200 Jewish American soldiers on that snowy day. Then 2 months later, he led a revolt that saved all the Americans from marching on a death march. In 2016, Yad Vashem, the world's Holocaust authority, honored my father as righteous among the nations. Now, righteous among the nations is the highest honor from the nation of Israel. It's given to non-Jews who saved Jews during the Holocaust. The historic ceremony was hosted at the Israeli embassy by Ambassador Dermer. It was attended by President Obama, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and movie maker Steven Spielberg. My father is the first of the U.S. soldiers to be named among the righteous. And he's only the 5th American to be so honored. And he's the first of the righteous to save American Jews. Now, also attending were really our special guests, POWs, Sonny Fox from Los Angeles, Lester Tanner from New York, and Paul Stern from Reston, Virginia. And it was Paul's 92nd birthday. What a remarkable day it was. What's more remarkable is that Dad's selfless actions, we've estimated, has saved nearly 13,000 people, including the soldiers, their children, their grandchildren, and generations to come. Currently, Dad is being considered for the Medal of Honor and the Congressional Gold Medal. The veterans and I think he deserves it. We hope you do too. Dad was a sincere Christian who lived by a simple faith. He believed that God is good and that we must be good to others. He stood up to hatred of the worst kind because it was simply the right thing to do. He lived by a deep moral code I call Roddy's code. He chose goodness. He opposed evil. He dignified life. He esteemed others better than himself. In Dad's diary, he wrote, "I'm just a little guy." Well, we might debate that. But what I've learned from Dad is that we don't have to be big, important, or even perfect to do the extraordinary. Just do the little things, the right things for the good of others. I'm convinced an ordinary life lived well is extraordinary, even heroic. Today, we pause to honor the men and women we call veterans, soldiers who serve for the good of others, ordinary lives that make an extraordinary difference. Veterans, I want to thank you for choosing to serve our country. Thank you for risking your life, your dreams, your future. Thank you for making us safe and defending our freedoms and our way of life. Thank you for your heroic influence in our lives. Our gratitude is boundless, our debt eternal, our reverence holy. Your gallantry and sacrifice is unmistakable. John 15:13 reminds us that greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Not a day goes by that I don't thank God for you. God thanks you as well. In Psalm 16:3, the Bible says, "The godly people in the land are my true heroes. I take pleasure in them." Gratefully, we do too. All of you are more than heroes. May we as Americans honor our veterans by loving them well and rejoicing in our precious freedoms. And may all of us live heroic by doing what's right for others. The Talmud says much the same. He who saves one life saves the world entire. So grab your cape, go save your world. One right choice, one good deed, one precious life at a time. Be the hero.
Thank you, Pastor Edmonds. Please welcome Becky Webb, representing the ORNL Veterans Committee.
Hello, I'm Becky Webb, the chairman of the ORNL Veterans Committee. Every year, the Veterans Committee sponsors a nonprofit that supports veterans. Some of our past recipients include Project Healing Water, Wreaths Across America, and Smoky Mountain Service Dogs. This year, the Veterans Committee is proud to present $500 to Habitat for Humanity for a veterans-built home. Families who partner with Habitat build their own homes alongside volunteers, pay an affordable, no-interest mortgage, and are very grateful for this support. Donations help families build strength, stability, and self-reliance for generations to come. This veteran-built home will be built in 2021 for a veteran currently working at the University of Tennessee. Once the build begins, there will be plenty of opportunities to help. We will communicate through ORNL today, soliciting volunteers for this worthwhile project. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Steve Macklin, our Master of Ceremony, our keynote speaker, Pastor Chris Edmonds, Melissa Harvey for stepping in at the last minute to sing our national anthem, Matt Hill, Catherine Regal, Jan Hishme, Missy Barr, and all the other Veteran Committee volunteers. And now back to Steve Macklin. Thank you.
And now some time of reflection as Taps is played. I want to leave you with a parting note. For those of you who served or are currently serving, thank you. Today's celebration is an effort to salute your service and pledge to never forget the sacrifices made to ensure and protect our freedoms. I would also like to thank those who made this event possible, especially our ORNL Veterans Committee. I would also like to thank our volunteers and our guest speaker, Pastor Chris Edmonds. Again, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and may God bless America.
Over hill, over dale, we will hit the dusty trail, and those gay songs go rolling along. In and out, hear them shout, cows are marching all about, and those gay songs go rolling along. Texans go rolling along. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to college joys, we sail at break of day, 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 day. Through our last night on shore, hail to the fall. Until we meet once more, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in Thee. Through howling gale and shot and shell to win our victory. Send bird mirages is